Want me to say something? You heard it? Oh. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Could I suggest a moment of silence since it's the 75th anniversary of D-Day to remember those that perished on that day fighting for our country? Thank you.
Okay. Big day. Okay. So tonight is a board discussion. Tonight is our night to have a conversation with each other, and we have a couple of items on the agenda for us. One is the cell tower, which we're going to talk about in a second, and also the fact that we received the library contract. We've got motions. We got 3 resolutions, 1 motion, and we will get to all of those after we begin with first the cell tower. And I thought what we could do is talk to each other about what our thoughts are, given we had a public hearing. We had 2 weeks of in between, so people could send in written things. I did get 1 email. I don't know if anybody else got it. Did anybody else get an email? Or
I got one.
You got one? I got one. It was a different one, I'm sure.
Yeah, you were not copied on the one I got.
Yeah,
so.
okay. So we got 2 emails. Did you get anything?
No.
Councilman Frazier? I did get an email, and I had a nice phone call from somebody who, a nice lady whose son lives on the Forest Lane, and she wanted to talk about the safety aspects of the cell tower. And that was the only communication I had. And I know that on the first open public hearing, we had 14 people speak the first night, and we had 9 people this week. So I think we've, given that there was 2 weeks and lots of opportunity, that I think we've heard from everybody. Now I want to hear from you all. I think the biggest thing that I heard was health considerations, and which I can understand. But I went back and I looked at, we've gotten so much information, and I had to do some of my own, obviously. But when you go back and you read the health and safety report that we received from the applicant, which I thought was very good, and then we also, I passed that out, I distributed that on email, this health and safety report, some people got it, everybody on the board's got it. Yeah. I thought this was quite interesting, and in as much as they talk about the maximum permissible exposure and the fact that this is on a scale of 1 to 100 is 2.0026%. So at the street level around the site. So I think I like this report because it had a lot of detail in it. Subsequently, today we received, I guess it was today, an email. We got another interesting report about, I'll back up a second. I did feel that there were people that radio frequency, or the RF, the term wasn't, not everybody was used to it. Mm-hmm. But I know you saw this earlier today. I thought this was very interesting. They talked about that there are lots of intentional types of sources of RF, and then of course there are unintentional. But the intentional types are radio and television broadcast, microwave radio dishes, satellite, airports use radar, pagers, cordless telephones, walkie-talkies, baby monitors, I've never thought about that, TV remote controls, garage and automatic door openers, keyless remotes for automobiles, wireless networks, wireless mouse for your computer, wireless computer keyboards. There are just so many uses of radio frequency that we weren't even aware of. And I know that the studies are showing that if you keep these cell towers at the low frequency that they're all at, you need more cell towers because they don't have that much reach. I think we're speaking to them early on. They had a reach of about a mile up and a mile down because the frequency is so low.
It's actually the power is low. It's the frequency is high.
Yes, you're right. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Steve. But then I went back and I looked personally. I just thought there was research that came out and people were sharing that, and I went back and I was trying to dig deep, and it's not all accurate, and some of it is not accurate. There's just no definitive health research. that supports some of the articles that people wanted to use. Like even the Ripon student diagnosed with cancer, so they removed it from, a cell tower was removed from a school, only to find out they were still getting cases of cancer, and then they went back and they looked at the fact that Nestle had been there for many years and was using carcinogens to remove caffeine from tea and stuff. So, I mean, now they're completely uncertain as to what's going on out there. The other thing I thought was interesting is, now I know some of you, I did not know this, but in 2015, Senator Schumer was criticizing Dutchess County. He was actually criticizing wireless companies and saying that their coverage maps made Dutchess County look too good, and that actually Dutchess County was really in bad shape from a wireless perspective. And his press release was interesting because he was asking for an investigation to find out if the cell phone maps were actually deceptive. And he said there are more cell phone dead zones in Dutchess County than post-winter potholes on the West Side Highway. Schumer said that at best this is inconvenient, inexpensive for customers, and at its worst, this lack of service could pose a serious threat to safety. And then he goes on to say that without accurate coverage maps, consumers in Hudson Valley and across the nation are forced to go through onerous, expensive, and sometimes dangerous experience of dead zones, dropped calls, and poor clarity. And then with the proliferation of smartphones, which everybody has, consumers are using wireless carriers far more than landlines to keep in touch with loved ones, peers, and business contacts. It's important for tourists and it's important for business, even for GPS technology so people can get here. So I think, there is some interesting, the health consideration is definitely not defined yet according to the American Cancer Society and everybody else, so the big organizations. So until we have definitive news, and the FCC doesn't allow us to take that into consideration, we have to take that off the table, even though that was the majority of the comments. And your heart goes out for people, but I think they also need to read some of this stuff and realize that the cell phone they hold in their hand is more dangerous for them than the cell tower up there. And I see every high school kid has one. And if they're not using earbuds and if they're putting it in a pocket, that is much more dangerous for them than a cell tower.
Middle school.
Middle schools have them, right?
Yeah.
Elementary school.
And I don't know if their parents say you have to use earbuds. I don't know. That's none of our business, but it is much more dangerous than a cell tower. And so, I mean, after reading a lot about it, I think that given that we're not allowed to consider the health consideration, I think, from my perspective, we can't, we'd all have that fear in the back of our mind. I think now I'm buying new earbuds after reading this, but, I don't really think we can address that and that's the biggest concern people have. What else did you guys hear?
Well, I heard, not on that topic, but on the tower itself, there's a lot of residents that are anxious for us to move forward with it because it's going to be a significant financial benefit to support the park. We've got a lot of capital projects that have to get done. We can't wait much longer to get some of them done, and this will be revenue that's going to help pay for some of that stuff.
Right.
Steady income that
And that is important.
we just need. It's as simple as that.
And I think that some of the other comments, from all the work that was done, and there were definitely some excellent consultants involved with this, being that it is surrounded by trees is a benefit. And considering most of those pictures.
Yeah, if you look carefully, it's going to be not very...
I think if you pull right onto Forest, you're going to see it, obviously, because we saw the red balloon that day. But when you get right up next to the forest, you're not going to see it, and the majority of those sites won't. So I think as sites go, it's probably, one of the better ones we could have.
From that perspective.
Yeah, from that perspective.
And those pictures represent a standard tower with no masking, which they've offered to do with their installation, is to mask the tower, to more match the natural surroundings.
Yeah, it's just that was just a monopole with antennas, two good shots we could see of it. But there really is a great need. On 55 is a dead zone.
I heard a number of comments about why we couldn't put the tower here. I have an amateur radio license, and in order to get that, you have to do some studying about radio transmissions and frequencies and such. You have to put the tower where it's needed. If we were to install it here, it wouldn't serve that corridor that has the lack of service. It's as simple as that. And it just wouldn't function.
It wouldn't function.
No.
And actually, we got an affidavit that had the different locations on it that Homeland had mentioned. And it was interesting because I know the supervisor in the town of Beekman, she really wanted us to consider moving it to where we're putting that solar development on 55. And she said, just put it on your own property. Just put it, well, it is our own property there too, but she meant that's in your own town. Can't you just move it over there? And she was, very passionate about it. And I understand her passion, and I understand the people coming to her and asking her to but they tested that as well, and they rejected it.
Right.
So none of the other things that we had available, or that, right in this general vicinity that Beekman has available were accepted. There were some deed restrictions and things too.
Bottom line is, we didn't pick the site.
Yeah, that's true.
We were asked if that could be used.
After the engineering work.
After
had been done.
evaluation and testing.
Yeah. But at least these other ones that I know that the supervisor, Kabuchi, really was pushing really hard for, they just won't do it. And so we don't have a choice there. We don't have anything else to offer.
Another point, I drive 55 constantly, and where I lose power, and I'll admit that the people on DeForest Lane probably have fine cell phone service.
Do they? I don't know.
That's what they tell me. They also have wireless.
Oh, that's right. Somebody mentioned that.
The wireless networks within their house. They also have microwaves within their house. Regardless of that, driving down, you get down around Precision Auto Body, and your cell phone service is sketchy at best. Not only is the cell phone service sketchy at best, but you figure emergency services radios also go out. After 20 years as a constable, I've listened to the radio broadcast for our town is covered by the state police and the sheriff's department. They lose their radios in that area just like we lose our cell phones in that area. If they're calling for a page in that area, and there could be a police officer right down at Precision Auto Body, they're not going to hear it until they get into a clear area again, which might be 5 minutes later when they call for a repost.
Right.
So that officer that might be right there could be
10 miles
15
away.
miles away.
Yeah.
When it
Well, there was a
comes
good point made at the first public hearing where a gentleman stood up and said that nowadays the emergency
Right.
people, they need cell phones because they won't give them gate numbers, they won't give them specific
Right.
private information on the radio. So they're using them more and more, and they prefer them. They want to have them with them.
Right, but I mean, it's emergency services that really are my concern.
Right.
And I've gone through everything on the cancer aspect of it. Like you said, there are probably more things in your home that are creating RF signals that you're not even aware of.
I had no idea about
that are-
baby monitors.
Yeah, I know, baby monitors. All my grandchildren had baby monitors in their rooms. And how many times do we put basically baby monitors in adults' rooms?
Yeah. Elderly
Because
adults.
elderly adults, so that we can keep track of them. And you figure when you go to the hospital, the schools were all wired with wireless frequencies.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
there.
And, they were talking about the proximity to two schools in Uniondale. I went up there the day that they flew the balloon. I couldn't see the tower from there.
Right.
But you sit there, because I go up there for soccer games and football games and baseball games for my grandchildren that are involved in sports up there, and you can see two towers.
Right.
So,
Well, I mean, I think that's the other thing. There is a national initiative, and I know the carriers are all being pressured to fill in these gaps of service. I know that. And they do, there is a gap on 55. There will be a cell tower covering that area on 55. We have another one on 82, but I don't know what the plan is there. But there will be one because they're all getting pressured to do it. And part of it is this national initiative. And people like Senator Schumer over the last 4 and 5 years have said, hey, don't leave the rural areas out. It's not fair. So there is going to be coverage one way or another.
And when you look at the bigger picture, Verizon is not giving much support to their landlines, along the road, regular old
Yes.
telephone lines. Less and less people have home phones, they're using cell phones. So there's less revenue, there's less desire. They're not putting in FiOS around here because they don't want to invest in any more facilities.
Infrastructure, yeah, they should.
want wireless. And people are having problems. I know several of them where they said, we're going to give you a wireless phone at the landline rate because it's not cost effective to fix the wires for you to have the regular landline.
Right.
So that's an unfortunate turn of events that's beyond our control.
I mean, in a way, our hands are tied because we know it's going to come. We know they're pushing it. We know the health factors can't be, and there's no definitive study anyway, because everything I read, and I went and checked on the ones we were given, and some of them were about 2G, not about, 4G or 4 LTE, none of this modern stuff. And some of them were outdated. Some of them were just wrong. They're wrong, and the results are all inconclusive. So people have to constantly do homework to know what they're talking about. But I think we've done a lot of work. I mean, this is all the information that we have compiled and read, and I know there's still some in my office, but there's tons of information, a lot of good information that was given to us. The one thing I wanted to make sure, the town board hired a consultant of our own to make sure that this cell tower was needed. And let me see, I need my glasses. But we hired Ron Grave to come in and analyze some of these reports that we as non-experts, and to tell us that it would be, do we actually need a cell tower here, or was somebody, and basically in Mr. Graves' report, he said he said what that lawyer said the other night, Mr. Fry. He said that there were 2 towers nearby that were overtaxed because everybody's using smartphones and they're doing, they're downloading a lot more. So they're overtaxed, and so basically they need that. And he said that that we're not allowed to, the site is excluded from further evaluation based on health reasons. So we couldn't talk about that, even though we asked him. But it did turn out that that there is a capacity issue. And that this tower is needed. So I felt comfortable that he looked at that, and we got additional reports from Verizon. Oh, it's showing us why this town hall wouldn't work. So they went back and studied that, and they have these capacity maps. I mean, they answered all of our questions, and our own consultant said, yeah, at the end of the day, they need the tower, and they're going to be putting a tower there. So,
The other issue that was brought up a lot was property values.
Yep. Oh, good.
And I tried looking through all sorts of sources, and I couldn't find any definitive sources saying that the price of your house will dwindle with a cell phone tower being nearby. I realize that there are people that do have these phobias, if you want to call it that, about cell towers being close by. But,
right.
As a rule, no, I don't think it's going to.
Well, this one is kind of up and hidden from if you're right next to the forest,
Right.
but there are definitely places where house properties go down, the values go down, but it's not always attributable. You're not sure if it's attributable to the cell tower or not. You don't really know. I did have that conversation with our assessor. So he said, you can look at 2 very similar properties, and they can both be holding their own. This one can have a cell tower, and it can still be better than this one if something else occurs, or the people aren't taking care of it or whatever it is. He said it's really a hard thing to define.
The neighborhood.
Yeah. Or, again, your maintenance, the way people take care of them, some have better curb appeal, and they don't. So he said you cannot say definitively. And I thought that report was interesting. There were so many numbers, so many houses that they had looked at. That was helpful. Everything is here, everything that we have. There's lots of appraisals in here. So I think we're going to be going through some things that will highlight the effort that's put forth here to make sure that the health was not a problem, even though we're not allowed to talk about, or not allowed to enter that into let that enter into the decision. I think it was a lot of time spent researching it on our part and discussing it, because nobody wants that situation. But since there is nothing definitive, I don't think that there's Beekman, they have a lot of things. You just can't say that the housing values are going to go down, all things being equal. So, what other points? Are we missing any that?
Well, there was one other thing. The first night, we had people saying that we didn't care about the Beekman residents because the money was going to Unionville. And I took it kind of personally, being honest. And yes, I think we looked into everything pertaining to the area, the health aspects, the property values, and I think we went above and beyond.
Well, we also really care about it. I just think that people have to realize that with the pressure on the carriers, the interest in making rural communities, have wireless communication and can be able to download things, I think part of this is out of our control, and we do care. But
Big incentive by the government right now is to have high-speed broadband throughout the country.
Yeah.
Including the rural areas.
5G.
And that's national, that's not
That's a
even,
big, that's an effort to drive the economy. I mean, that's going to be, the Internet of Things is going to be huge. So, I mean, given that, I don't think we've missed anything, because the applicant also, Homeland Tower, submitted a ton of really interesting reports too, as far as the noise level, which it sounded to me like it sounded like you could equate it to two people having a normal range, not like I talk loud sometimes, especially on that microphone, but a normal conversation over 50 feet away. That's what it might sound like. It sounded, to me, that the noise was not going to be a problem. The other thing I thought was interesting in here is there was an engineering report where they talked about, in the absolute worst case scenario, the way they're designing this tower, in the absolute worst case scenario, if there was a huge hurricane, something bad happened, it was designed so that the tower, if it broke and fell, it would fall within that parcel. Our 16.2 acre, it would fall within that parcel, so that because of the hinges and things that they put on it. So they've really, they've lowered the power, and the frequency, the radio frequency is low, and they've designed it in a way so that...
Minimize risk.
I was impressed by that too. So... Anything else, Councilman Frazier, anything you want to?
I think we've covered just about everything. I mean, I was going to mention that if any Bluetooth device transmits a radio signal, if you have an earpiece, you're transmitting a radio signal.
That's true.
To that, from a phone or a speaker, anything. Something else that I've noticed, and I actually inquired about it because I was curious, I had noticed these little white boxes on the telephone poles, and they're Wi-Fi transmitters. So as you're driving down the street, you're getting hit with Wi-Fi signals that are probably as strong as anything that's going to come out of this tower.
how many people have Wi-Fi in their cars now? I know I do.
Yeah, most cars have it.
Yeah.
They come with it.
There's radio signals everywhere, and it's a way of life at this point.
Now with 5G coming, they're going to have those smaller towers all over, so it's still evolving. Well, I mean,
I know we were kind of encouraged to slow down, but, for us, I know that the public has kind of just been informed, but for us, the process has been very long since we first went out and looked at the property. We were engaged in the conversation. We didn't approach the conversation. I know, we were even surprised, like, well, you got to search the deed, and lawyers search the deed, and we were surprised the deed would even allow it on that parcel. So I feel like, the pace has been appropriate. It's been like 10 months coming since our first conversation. Yeah. And along the way, we did our due diligence even before we got this paperwork. I do believe as a nurse you can find a study for anything you yourself want to believe. So I had that conversation with Robert, so he's like, absolutely, our assessor, you can go find people that are out to prove that assessments went down, you can find people that prove assessments go up, but without apples to apples and everything being equal, he said it's really just, an impossible task to prove. I know safety was a concern, certainly as a nurse, that is a high concern for me. American Cancer Society has a statement on this that they feel it poses no cancer risk. I know some of the concern in the public hearings have been who did the studies, like are they third party? They are third party. Yes, we listen to Homeland Towers. Yes, we're getting some things from Verizon, but lots of other things are from other people along the way, or all of us doing our own research, or talking to Robert, or somebody that doesn't have any personal vested interest. I know aesthetics is a concern, but I think in terms of cell phone towers, certainly where they came when cell phone towers were in a bag to where they look now, very different. And it is hidden it's in a park. It's hidden with trees around it. I realize there'll be winter and leaves will fall, but for 9 months out of the year, it's going to be relatively hidden. I was really impressed with the balloon test that I think in only 2 of them that took pictures, and it is red, so of course you're going to see red, but so it will obviously blend when it's not red. I feel like the process, we looked at a lot of different things along the way. Nobody was trigger happy to say, let's just do this, we'll do this quick. We've had several site visits, we've had lots of conversation ourselves with
talked to a lot of residents.
I do, there is always a concern for change and a worry that will somebody find out in 50 years, everybody smoked cigarettes and they weren't bad for you, and then you find out in 50 years. But cell phone towers have now been around for a long, long time. And the reality is that one cell phone tower was removed and they hoped the cancer risk would go away, but it was not due to the cell phone tower. It was prematurely removed. If it was true, every cell phone tower would be gone, but they're not. And the reality is, I bet every single person in this room, or maybe 2 of you, we have cell phones. Every one of us have cell phones. I actually don't have service in my house. So I still have a landline, but and this may change that for me, I don't know, but that is the reality. So it's not that we can get away from radio wave frequencies, it's that we can mitigate. You have
to be smart in how you use your own products and what you buy and how you...
Each of my children, I remember when they started using the microwave and we're like, no, too close, go back. It's like, because standing in front of a microwave is a huge risk, even now with more modern microwaves, which emit less than they used to. But, microwaves in your house, there's just so many things. And you're right, everything is wireless. People wirelessly can turn on their lights from work, or they wirelessly watch their baby and their nanny from their phones. So it's about mitigating. We can't eliminate. Life isn't going to go back to 150 years ago. I did think it was actually really lovely of the Connors family that doesn't have a deed restriction, that we are able to steward what they gave our town with the income that it will produce.
Since it's going to help this park. And it's at the least used trail that we have.
And we're not eliminating a trail, it's like even behind the trail.
Right. All right, well, it sounds like we're all on the same page. I think rather than stop, we'll keep going to the resolutions in regards to the cell tower, and I would start with 1927. Now, this is a long resolution because it's pretty comprehensive. So I thought what we would do is each one of us would read a page. So I'm going to read the first one. I'm going to pass it off to Steve, if that's okay.
Would you mind if I gave you some background about
You want
that
to do that now?
resolution?
Yeah, okay.
If you don't mind.
Please.
The State Environmental Quality Review Act
Yeah.
is abbreviated as SEQRA, but also SEQR. It's found in the Environmental Conservation Law. But separate from that, there are what they call the seeker regs. And they're found in the New York Code of Rules and Regulations, Part 617. So I think in this resolution, you'll see 6 NYCRR 617. That's what's being referred to.
Okay.
Those regs implement seeker. Tells you what you have to do. A board, when it receives an application, has to conduct an environmental review. And it has to classify the action before it, and there are lists in the regs. There's a Type 2 list. If an action is on that Type 2 list, there's no further environmental review. Those are things that are deemed to be of no significance. There's a Type 1 list. Those are the more serious actions, and if something's on the Type 1 list, it's more likely to have a significant environmental impact. If an action isn't on either list, it's called an unlisted action. This action fell within that. It's not on the Type 2 list, it's not on the Type 1 list, so that's why it's classified in here as a Type 2.
Unlisted.
Excuse me, unlisted, I'm sorry. Way to thank you. The seeker regs have some official forms, and one of them is an environmental assessment form. And when a full environmental assessment form is used, the applicant completes the first part and submits it, and that happened here. The board is supposed to complete the second part and the third part, and that's why you have those here tonight. As part of the resolution, you're authorizing the supervisor to sign that part 3. Okay. And then finally, in the resolution itself, there are impact areas considered. And those aren't just made up, they come right from the seeker regs. There are 12 listed things that boards are supposed to consider. So in your resolution, you consider each of those areas. So I just wanted to give you that background so that maybe you'd understand the resolution a little better as you see some of the technicalities.
Great. For the people here, I think that's great. And also for the folks at home, because we're taping, so. All right, I'll start with page 1, and then we will keep reading until
we're done.
page 9. Resolution 19-27, seeker of negative declaration and notice of determination of non-significance. This resolution is issued pursuant to 6 NYCRR 617 pertaining to Environmental Conservation Law Article 8, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, as Jeff just said. Name and address of lead agency, Town of Unionville Board. See below. Name and address and phone number of person who can provide additional information. They list this, Betsy Moss is the supervisor, and the address here. Brief description of action. The application requested that the Town of Unionville Town Board perform a Monroe balancing test to consider a proposed wireless telecommunications facility consisting of a 150-foot monopole with antennas, access driveway, together with related equipment within a 4,410 square foot fenced compound within a 5,220 square foot leased area, constituting a portion of property identified as tax map parcel number, and I'm going to use the significant ones, 960870, and by the street address of 43 DeForest Lane. The seeker classification of action, unlisted. Location of action, 43 DeForest Lane on real property owned by the Town of Unionville, located in the town of Beekman, Dutchess County, New York. Procedural and documentary background. Number 1, the Town of Unionville Town Board executed an option and ground lease agreement, herein the agreement, with Homeland Towers, LLC, for the lease of a portion of real property identified as tax map parcel 960870, and by the street address of 43 DeForest Lane, herein the property. For purposes of installation and maintenance of a 150-foot monopole telecommunications tower and related equipment, herein the facility is subject to Homeland Towers LLC obtaining all necessary approvals. An environmental review was performed and a negative declaration issued, which related solely to the execution of the agreement and not in relation to any application which might be submitted pursuant to the agreement. Number 2, the resolution which authorized the agreement was subject to permissive referendum. A notice of the adoption of the resolution was duly posted and published pursuant to New York State Town Law Section 90. The period for filing a petition seeking a permissive referendum expired, and no such petition was filed.
3, the property is owned by the town of Unionville as part of Timor Park and is located in the town of Beekman. 4, Homeland Towers LLC has submitted an application to the town of Unionville Town Board dated April 16, 2019, seeking approval for the facility and requesting that the town of Unionville Town Board consider whether the facility should be immune from local zoning regulations pursuant to the balancing of interest test enunciated by the New York State Court of Appeals in matter of County of Monroe versus City of Rochester. 5, the application included the following documents. A, full environmental assessment form. B, EAF mapper summary report. C, property location map. D, site plan prepared by APT Engineering, last revised 3/28/19. E, compound plan prepared by APT Engineering, last revised 3/28/19. F, west elevation prepared by APT Engineering, last revised 3/28/19. G, custom soil resource report. H, National Wetlands Inventory, New York 090, Beekman 2, Federal Wetlands. I, New York 090, Beekman 2, DEC Wetlands. J, Environmental Resource Mapper. K, New York State, not sure what that is, anachronism is, but OPRPHP, Cultural Resource Information System map. L, Visual EAF Addendum. 6, by resolution dated April 18, 2019, the Town of Unionville Town Board classified the action as an unlisted action, declared its intent to serve as lead agency, and authorized the circulation of the application. The application was circulated to the town of the Beekman Town Board and Town Beekman Planning Board, and neither served a notice declaring intent to serve as lead agency. 7, by the same resolution, the Town of Unionville Town Board scheduled a public hearing for May 21, 2019 to review whether the application should be exempt from local land use regulations under the standards set forth in matter County of Monroe versus City of Rochester, 72 New York 2nd, 338, 1988. 8, copies of said resolutions and the application with all supporting materials were mailed to the Town of Beekman Town Board and the Town of Beekman Planning Board on April 24, 2019. 9, an inquiry was made to the Dutchess County Department of Planning and Development as to whether a referral needed to be made to said department pursuant to General Municipal Law, Section 239M, and said department advised that such referral did not need to be made for matters involving the balancing of interest test set forth in matter County of Monroe versus City of Rochester.
10, prior to the submission of the application, a balloon test was conducted on April 17th of 2019 with an orange balloon having been flown at the site at a height of 150 feet above ground level for a period of 8 hours, with prior notice having been given to the Town of Beekman Town Board and the residents along DeForest Lane by publication and mailing. The specifics of the balloon test are described in the visual resource assessment subsequently referenced herein. On May 20th of 2019, the applicant hand-delivered supplemental materials to the Town of Unionville Town Board, the Town of Beekman Town Board, the Town of Beekman Planning Board, and said materials consisting of the following. Cover letter of Robert D. Gaudioso, Esquire, Snyder & Snyder, attorney for Homeland Towers, Pinnacle Telecom Group, antenna site, assessment and report dated April 30th of 2019, affidavit of Raymond Bergotti dated May 16th as to alternate sites considered, Verizon Wireless Communications Facility Engineering necessity case, Cumberland, dated May 13th of 2019, Saratoga Associates Visual Resource Assessment dated May 14th of 2019, consisting of 12-page report and 14 pages of color visual resource assessment figures. Certification of APT Engineering as to the facility meeting the structural standard. Plans prepared by APT Engineering dated May 15th of 2019, consisting of title sheet and index, a butter's pan, overall site plan, partial site plan, access driveway profile and details, landscaping plan, compound plan, elevations, erosion control notes, erosion control details, site details, Verizon equipment plan and details, and Verizon antenna plan and details. 12, presentation of the application was made at the public hearing on May 21st of 2019 by Raymond Brigatti of Homeland Towers and Robert Gaudioso of Schneider & Schneider. Questions from the public related to the presentation were answered. The public hearing was opened and all comments were received by the Unionville Town Board, and then public hearing was adjourned to June 4th, 2019. A notification sign had been posted at the property in advance of the public hearing. On May 23rd, 2019, a revised full EAF was submitted to correct the zoning design designation for the property, and a noise confirmation letter was submitted, with said submissions being made to the Town of Unionville Town Board, the Town of Beekman Town Board, and the Town of Beekman Planning Board.
14, the Town of Unionville Town Board caused an analysis to be made of the RF submissions from the applicant retaining Ronald E. Graff, P.E. for that purpose. 15, Ronald E. Graff submitted his report to the Town of Unionville Board on May 28, 2019. 16, on June 3rd, 2019, the applicant hand-delivered supplemental materials to the Town of Unionville Town Board with copies to the Town of Beekman Town Board and the Town of Beekman Planning Board. Said materials consisting of the following: cover letter from Robert A. Gaudioso, Esquire. Further resolve full EAF with all attachments. Alternative site analysis from Verizon Wireless RF engineer confirming that the town hall partial will not remedy the gap in service. D, Phase 1 archaeological survey from EBI confirming that there are no historic properties in that area of potential effects and confirming no adverse effect on archaeological resources. E, revised alternate site analysis from Raymond M. Brigatti, including the relevant deed restrictions. F, letter from EBI confirming no adverse effects on threatened or endangered species. G, property value appraisal report from Lane Appraisals confirming no diminutive in property values from proposed facilities. 17, in addition to presentation of this application an additional presentation of this application was made at the adjourned public hearing on June 4, 2019 by Raymond M. Brigatti of Homeland Towers LLC, Jordan Fry, Esquire of Schneider & Schneider LLC. Questions from the public related to the presentation were answered. The public hearing was reopened and all comments were received by the Town of Unionville Town Board, and the public hearing was then closed. On that day, a submission was made by the applicant from Verizon Network Engineering dated June 4th, 2019, addressing analysis of existing cell towers providing coverage and capacity in the area. 18, on June 16, 2019, in response to comments made by the public hearing about the RF submissions, the applicant submitted a letter by email, attachment from Pinnacle Telecom Group, LLC, dated June 5th, 2019, which provided general information about RF emissions from commonly used devices in the area of common exposure. 19, because the property is located in Timor Park Recreation Park, part of the Town of Unionville, it is necessary for the Town of Unionville to proceed with the parkland alienation process through the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and the New York State Legislature. The seeker review of this negative declaration apply to that process, as well as the Monroe analysis and balancing interest test.
20, a draft application with supporting documentation has been prepared for submission to the appropriate state legislators and the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, subject to completion of the seeker process. Whereas this determination of non-significance, i.e. negative declaration, is prepared in accordance with Article 8 of the Environmental Conservation Law, the State Environmental Quality Review Act, seeker, and its implementing regulations set forth in 6 NYC RR Part 617. Whereas the Town of Unionville Town Board hereby declares itself the lead agency involved in the seeker review, and whereas the Town of Unionville Town Board has classified this action as an unlisted action pursuant to 6 NYC RR 617. Whereas the Town of Unionville Town Board has caused the preparation of the Parts 2 and 3 of the FEAF and intends that this negative declaration be attached to it and become part of it, and whereas the Town of Unionville Town Board has reviewed the action and all the above referenced supporting information, public comments, and documentation, and has determined that there will be no significant adverse environmental impacts associated with this action, and whereas this negative declaration is supported and substantiated by the following conclusions of the lead agency. Number one, the action will not have a substantial adverse change in existing air quality, ground or surface water quality or quantity, traffic or noise levels, a substantial increase in solid waste production, nor a substantial increase in potential for erosion, flooding, leaching, or drainage problems. The action calls for the installation of an unmanned facility. Neither a well nor a septic system will be installed. All improvements will be installed outside of the wetlands and the wetland buffers on the property. The tower and related equipment will not generate solid waste and will have no impact on air quality. Erosion and drainage impacts were addressed in the erosion control notes, erosion control details, and the site details submitted by the applicant. All construction vehicles will generate modest traffic impact during the period of construction. Following completion of construction, almost no traffic will be generated by the site. The construction period has been estimated as 2 to 3 months.
The site plan shows that the fenced-in compound will be located outside of the buffer zones for the 2 wetlands that are partially on the property. The partial site plan shows that the compound will be enclosed by an 8-foot-high chain-link fence with brown privacy slats. There will be evergreen landscape screening installed with approximately 23 evergreen trees used. The landscaping plan shows that 8-foot-high Norwegian spruces will be installed. Number 2, the action will not result in the removal or destruction of large quantities of vegetation or fauna, substantial interference with the movement of any resident or migratory fish or wildlife species, impacts on a significant habitat area, substantial adverse impacts on threatened or endangered species of animal or plant, or the habitat of such a species, or other significant adverse impacts to natural resources. The site consists of 16.2 acres of land, and only about 1/2 of an acre will be disturbed. The action will have no impact on fish, as there are no water bodies or watercourses being disturbed. Since such a small percentage of the land will be disturbed, the project will have no significant impact on resident or migratory wildlife species. The applicant submitted a letter from EBI Consulting dated June 3, 2019, regarding threatened and endangered species. Although the property may be a site involving Indiana bats, the applicant will only be able to cut and remove trees and habitat for such bats during periods permitted by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and must obtain any required permits from such service. EBI's letter noted no evidence for actual habitat of the northern long-eared bat at the site. EBI's letter summarized habitat related to bog turtles and noted that the applicant will take measure in accordance with USFW's guidelines involving a pre-construction survey, working education, and exclusion fencing. Based upon the contents of the letter and the mitigation measures, there will not be a significant impact on habitat area for threatened or endangered species. A gravel driveway will be installed for access to the site. It will be 12 feet wide and approximately 470 feet long. It will provide access for construction purposes, but following completion of construction will only be accessed for maintenance and emergency purposes. It will not be open to the public for use and will be secured by posts and chain. Required silt fencing will be installed and maintained during construction. The extensive RF analysis documents submitted by the applicant demonstrate the need for the facility in terms of coverage and capacity. The applicant has submitted satisfactory documentation regarding alternative sites considered. Number 3, there will be no impairment of the environment characteristics of a critical environmental area as designated pursuant to Section 6 NYCRR 617.14G, because the property does not include and does not border such an area.
4, the action does not create a material conflict with the community's current plans or goals as officially approved or adopted. Since the time when the town of Unionville acquired title to the various parcels of land which comprise Time Warp Park, the town of Unionville Town Board has controlled all uses and improvements to the park. The park consists of many buildings, fields, trails, and land for recreational purposes, but it also consists of residences which are rented, the town hall, vehicle and equipment storage buildings, and additional improvements not associated with recreation. The town has pledged, and the option of the ground lease agreement requires, that all net rental income from the lease be used solely to improve and maintain the town parks and the structures and improvements now in them or added to them. The action will result in improved self-service throughout Time Warp Park, which benefits all of its users, many of whom are residents of the town of Beekman, and promotes the safety and welfare of the people using the park. The action will not result in the impairment of the character or quality of important historical, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources of existing community or neighborhood character. The site plan shows that the nearest residence is located over 500 feet away from the tower. Although the contemplated Monroe analysis might take the action exempt from the local land use regulations, the tower height, 150 feet, meets the requirements of both the Town of Beekman Town Code and the Town of Unionville Town Code. It also meets the roadway setback requirements of both codes. The site does not have important historical, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources. There are presently no improvements on the property. The applicant submitted a Phase 1 archaeological survey report from EBI Consulting, which concluded that the site is not recommended for inclusion on the National Register of Historic Places and recommended a no historic properties determination. It noted that if, during construction, any artifacts or culturally modified soil deposits are encountered, construction must stop until a qualified archaeologist views the finds and makes an evaluation. The visual resource addendum prepared by the Saratoga Associates used an area of 2-mile radius from the proposed facility. DeForest Lane was described as an 1,100-foot-long unpaved dead-end street currently serving 7 single-family residences. There are 9 residences within 1,000 feet of the facility. The visual resource addendum summarized that the methodology and standards used. It reported that no actual visibility was identified during the April 17th balloon test in the view shed from Time Warp Park, nor the view shed from the Beekman Recreation Park. For residential areas within a 1-mile radius, it reported that the views of the facility will be substantially screened by intervening dense, mature woodland vegetation, even during winter leaf off-season. For DeForest Lane, it reported that the facility will be directly visible above the intervening tree line when viewed from the intersection with Route 55, but the view becomes increasingly screened as one moves eastward towards the facility. In the summary and conclusion section of the report, the New York State DEC visual policy is referenced, and the report provides that it is clear that any remaining project visibility is not of a size or extent that it could constitute an unacceptable magnitude. Nor does the facility affect a sufficient number of public viewers or geographic area where the facility can reasonably be deemed to be visually important as defined by SECRET. It concludes, as such, the proposed project will not result in an adverse visual impact. The town board accepts the findings and conclusions of the report.
6, the action will not result in a major change in the use of either the quantity or type of energy. The applicant will connect to the existing electrical utility grid and will install underground utilities on the site. An on-site emergency backup generator will be installed within the fenced compound for use during temporary power outages. The noise from the generator will not exceed any noise regulations which could apply. 7, the action will not result in the creation of a hazard to human health. The report submitted by Pinnacle Telecom Group entitled Antenna Site FCC RF Compliance Assessment and Report indicates that the FCC has established a limit for general population maximum permissible exposure levels for continuous human exposure to radio frequency, RF. The analysis found that at ground level, the tower with all antennas installed would produce a maximum level of 2.0026% of the FCC MPE level. The report also describes this as 45 times below the FCC MPE limit. 8, the action will not result in a substantial change in the use or intensity of use of land, including agricultural, open space, or recreational resources, or in its capacity to support existing uses. As stated above, the site consists of 16.2 acres of land, and only about 1/2 of an acre will be disturbed. The park as a whole consists of over 500 acres of land, so use and intensity of use by this action is minimal. The action will improve cell phone service in the park, so it's a benefit and promotion to the safety and welfare of all users of the park. In addition, when the site is no longer in use, the improvements must be removed and the site returned to its prior state. Performance bond or other security will be required for this purpose. 9, the action will not encourage or attract a large number of people to a place or places for more than a few days compared to the number of people who would come to such a place absent the action. As stated above, the facility will be unmanned. The facility is not open to the public, and following completion of construction would only be accessed by maintenance personnel.
10, the action will not result in the creation of a material demand for other actions that would result in one of the above consequences. The action will not result in the creation of a material demand for anything. Please see number 9 above. 11, the action will not result in 2 or more elements of the environment, no one of which has a significant impact on the environment, but when considered together results in a substantial adverse impact on the environment. None of the above criteria results in a significant impact on the environment, and the combination of any impacts will also not result in a substantial adverse impact. 12, this action does not involve 2 or more unrelated actions undertaken, funded, or approved by any agency, none of which has or would have a significant impact on the environment, but when considered cumulatively would result in one or more of the criteria above listed. This action is a standalone action which does not involve any related actions. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Town of Unionville Town Board has determined that the action will not have a significant adverse impact on the environment, and be it further resolved that the Town Board of the Town of Unionville issues this negative declaration in relation to the Town Board's decision on the Monroe Balancing Interest Test, the State of New York Parkland alienation process, and the issuance of a municipal home rule resolution and related documentation, and the approval of the application for the facility. And be it further resolved that the Town of Unionville Town Board hereby issues this negative declaration and notice thereof pursuant to the requirements of SECRA and its implemented regulations, and authorizes the supervisor to execute Part 3 of the FEAF, and be it further resolved that the Town of Unionville Town Board hereby authorizes the filing of this negative declaration and notice thereof pursuant to the requirements of SECRA. And 6, NYCRR Section 617.12 of its impending regulations.
Okay, so since I proposed the resolution, may I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, Andrea, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Moss?
Aye.
Councilman Frazier?
Aye.
Councilman Kelly?
Yes.
Councilman Flores?
Aye.
Councilman Welch?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, resolution passes. Resolution 619-27 passes.
Okay.
Now we have 19-28.
Want me to start that one?
I think it's much shorter, yes?
Okay. Resolution 19-28, determination as to the Monroe balancing of interest test and approval of application. Whereas the Town of Unionville Town Board executed an option and ground lease agreement, herein called the agreement, with Homeland Towers LLC for the lease of a portion of real property identified as tax map parcel 13-2200-665-9-0-960-870-0000 and by the street address of 43 DeForest Lane, herein called property, for purposes of installation and maintenance of a 150-foot monopole telecommunications tower and related equipment, herein the facility, subject to Homeland Towers LLC obtaining all necessary approvals, and whereas the resolution which authorized the agreement was subject to permissive referendum, a notice of the adoption of resolution was duly posted and published pursuant to New York State Town Law, Section 90, and no petition seeking or permissive referendum was filed, and whereas the property is owned by the Town of Unionville as part of Timor Park and is located in the Town of Beekman, and whereas Homeland Towers LLC submitted an application to the Town of Unionville Town Board dated April 16, 2019, seeking approval for the facility and requesting that the Town of Unionville Town Board consider whether the facility should be immune from local zoning regulations pursuant to the balancing of interest test enunciated by the State of New York Court of Appeals in the matter of County of Monroe versus City of Rochester, 72 New York 2nd, 338, 1988. And whereas because the property is located in Timor Park, a recreation park in the Town of Unionville, it is necessary for the Town of Unionville Town Board to proceed with the parkland alienation process through the New York State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation and the New York State Legislature. And whereas the Town of Unionville Town Board served as lead agency in the environmental review of the application and held a public hearing on May 21st, 2019, and on June 4th, 2019, to review whether the application should be exempt from local land use regulations under the standards set forth in matter of County of Monroe versus City of Rochester, and to hear comments from the public related to environmental and any other matters related to the application. And whereas on June 6, 2019, the Town of Unionville Town Board issue a determination of non-significance, i.e. negative declaration by resolution prepared in accordance with Article 8 of the Environmental Conservation Law, namely the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SEQR, and its implementing regulations set forth in 6 NYCRR Part 617 regulations, and said resolution applied to the review under the standards set forth in matter of County of Monroe versus City of Rochester, the approval of the application and the parkland alienation process. And whereas the New York State Court of Appeals in the matter of County of Monroe versus City of Rochester recognized that the municipal entities in New York State can be exempt or immune from local land use regulations, and provided the 9 factors to be considered when analyzing whether such exemption or immunity applies. And whereas those 9 factors are as follows. Number 1, the nature and scope of the instrumentality seeking immunity. 2, the encroaching governmental equities legislative grant of authority. 3, the kind of function or land use involved. 4, the effect local land use regulation would have upon the enterprise concerned. And 5, alternate locations for the facility in less restrictive zoning areas. 6, the impact upon legitimate local interests. 7, alternative methods of providing the proposed improvement. 8, the extent of the public interest to be served. And 9, the intergovernmental participation in the project development process and an opportunity to be heard. And whereas the town board of the town of Unionville has analyzed each of these 9 factors in determining whether the application should be exempt or immune from local land use regulations. Now therefore be it resolved that the town board of the town of Unionville makes the following findings and has determined that the application is exempt or immune from local land use regulations. Number 1, the nature and scope of the instrumentality seeking immunity is in effect the town of Unionville, since it has executed an option and ground lease agreement with Homeland Towers. The town of Unionville Town Board acted in the governmental propriety capacity for the benefit of its residents, the users of Time Warp Park, the users of cell phone service, and the area of the emergency service personnel when seeking to provide enhanced cell phone coverage and capacity, as well as revenue from a source other than real property taxes. You want to take it?
Not enough, there's more. Number 2, the encroaching governments, the town of Unionville. Legislative grant of authority comes from the New York State Legislature since it is a duly incorporated town in the state of New York. Number 3, the kind of function or land use involved is installation and maintenance of a 150-foot monopole telecommunications tower and related equipment to provide enhanced cell phone service and to assist in remedying a coverage gap and capacity limitations. Number 4, the effect local land use regulation would have upon the enterprise concerned is as follows. The property is located in the LC zoning district under the Town of Beekman Town Code. The enterprise would not be permitted or specially permitted use in that district. However, the code also provides a preference for locating such enterprises on municipally owned lands and in, quote, as low population density areas as possible, unquote. DeForest Lane, where the enterprise will be located, is an unpaved, dead-end road currently serving 7 residential properties, and there are 9 residences within 1,000-foot radius of the property. The facility does meet the tower height restrictions, roadway setback requirements, screening requirements, and noise restrictions which exist under the Town of Beekman Town Code and the Town of Unionville Town Code. The facility allows 4 co-location by 4 carriers on the tower. Number 5, there are no alternative locations for the facility in less restrictive zoning areas. An alternative site analysis was provided and then updated, which showed that several alternative sites were considered and none of them were feasible. They were either encumbered by restrictive covenants, which would prevent the use, or they would not help to remedy the coverage gap and capacity limitations. Number 6, the impact upon legitimate local interests is positive, since the facility will provide enhanced cell phone service, access for providers of emergency services at no charge, revenue from a source other than real property taxes, and with all such revenue being dedicated to the maintenance improvement of the park and recreation facilities and programs. Information submitted by the applicant showed that the RF emissions from the facility at full build-out with 4 carriers co-locating on the tower would be 45 times below the maximum permissible exposure, or MPE, level set by the Federal Communications Commission. Number 7, there are no effective alternative means of providing the proposed improvement. As stated above, the analysis of alternative sites showed that none of them were feasible. They were either encumbered by restrictive covenants, which would prevent the use, or they would not help to remedy the coverage gap and capacity limitations. Steve, you want to go ahead?
Sure. The extent of the public interest to be served by the improvements is substantial. Time Warp Park has a substantial number of buildings, roadways, athletic fields, an equestrian center, a pond with a boathouse and dam, and other improvements. The lease provide revenue which will help to maintain and improve these facilities and the programs offered in them. Cell service within the park will be improved, which will help all users of the park. Emergency services will also be improved because of their ability to use the cell tower at no rental charge. The facility will help to remedy a coverage gap and a capacity limitation, so area residents and travelers will benefit from improved cell phone service. Excuse me. Intergovernmental participation in the project developmental process and an opportunity to be heard have both been substantial. Submissions by the applicant have been very extensive and have been updated or supplemented at least twice. Copies of all submissions were provided to the Town of Beekman Town Board and Town of Beekman Planning Board. Notification of the application was provided to all residents on DeForest Lane. Notification of the balloon test was also provided to residents of DeForest Lane. A public hearing was held. It was adjourned to a second date, then reopened and subsequently closed. Members of the Beekman Town Board attended the hearing and asked questions. The attorney for the Beekman Town Board attended both dates for the public hearing and made comments on both dates. Most, if not all, residents of DeForest Lane attended the public hearing and made comments. Color photos of the balloon test and visual simulation were posted in the Town of Unionville Town Hall for all to see. At both dates of the public hearing, representatives for the applicant appeared and answered all questions asked of them by member of the public who were in attendance. Excuse me. Be it further resolved that the Town of Unionville Town Board approves the application submitted by Homeland Towers to and authorizes the supervisor and any appropriate Town of Unionville personnel to execute any and all documents reasonably necessary to give effect to this resolution. Be it further resolved that the Town of Unionville Town Board authorizes the execution and submission of all documents reasonably necessary to comply with the New York State Parkland alienation process and authorizes the supervisor to take any other actions reasonably necessary in relation to that process and approval.
Okay, Councilman Welch, thank you for proposing that resolution. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
All right, may I have a roll call vote, please?
Supervisor Lutz?
Aye.
Councilman Frazier?
Aye.
Councilman Kelly? Councilman Lawrence?
Aye.
Councilman Welch?
Aye.
Okay, one more resolution.
1929.
This is 1929. Karina, do you want to start with this?
Yep. Requesting from the New York State Legislature the authority to alienate a portion of the Town of Unionville's Timer Park. Whereas the Town of Unionville Town Board requests authorization to lease 5,250 square feet of space, a small portion of unused property located within Timer Park, owned by the Town of Unionville, located in the Town of Beekman for purposes of installation and operation of a wireless communication facility, cell tower, as illustrated in the attached Exhibit A, and whereas the small portion of Timer Park contemplated for use as the wireless communication facility is currently in the forest near a less popular hiking trail, and whereas the proposed wireless communication facility constitutes critical network infrastructure which will provide wireless service to emergency personnel, including police, fire, and ambulance, users of Timer Park, as well as members of the general public nearby and along State Route 55 in the Town of Beekman. And whereas such proposed lease requires parkland alienation legislation by the New York State Legislature and compliance with the State Environmental Quality Review Act, SECRA. And whereas the Town of Unionville Town Board has carefully considered the potential environmental impacts related to installation and operation of the wireless communication facility at the proposed location on the property, and after conducting a public hearing and other public meetings on the subject, has confirmed that the proposed wireless communication facility will not result in any negative, adverse environmental impacts, and as such, has issued a negative declaration pursuant to the requirements of SECRA. And whereas to assist members of the New York State Senate and Assembly who will be sponsoring legislation authorizing the alienation and the Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, the Town Board has prepared the Parkland Alienation Form, municipal information attached hereto as Exhibit B. Now therefore, be it resolved that the Town of Unionville Town Board requests the New York State Legislature adopt legislation authorizing the Town of Unionville Town Board to alienate a small portion of Timer Park for purposes of the installation and operation of a wireless communications facility as is illustrated in attached Exhibit A, and be it further resolved that the supervisor of the Town of Unionville is hereby empowered and directed to execute any agreement, documents, or papers that may be necessary to implement the intent and purposes of this resolution. And be it further resolved that the clerk of the Town of Unionville Town Board, in conjunction with any other duly authorized representatives, is hereby directed to send a copy of this resolution and all supporting documentation to the New York State Senate and Assembly Home Rule officers, Senator Sue Serino and Assemblyman Karen Lawler.
Thank you, Councilwoman Kelly. We have a second. May I have a roll call vote?
Supervisor Mott?
Aye.
Councilman Frazier?
Aye.
Councilman Kelly? Councilman McLaurin?
Aye.
Councilman Welch?
Aye.
Okay. Resolution 19-29 passes. 27, 28, 29. At this point, do we, with the EAF, we're just going to sign these later because it's been completed?
Yeah, what you need to do is just sign at the end of Part 3.
Part three.
This one right here, on the reverse side.
I'm going to do that. Got it.
Sign it there.
Yeah, great. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Now, that concludes the resolutions in regards to the cell tower at 43 DeForest Lane. I'd like to make a motion that we establish a petty cash fund for the pool. The swimming pool, we're reviewing all of our cash policies and have rerouting some things so that there will never be any cash down there, down in recreation. It'll come up here every day, and then we'll have deposits made twice a week.
Yeah.
And change the procedures, which, used to be where things stayed down there for a couple of weeks. So now we're implementing new procedures and discussing with our new pool director, Michael Cookinghamshire, I think? Cookingham, I love that name. Anyway, Michael, they need some cash on hand in order to sell passes on the weekends. So they've never had a petty cash fund before. They're not in our org meeting. So we wanted to get them set up and then make it official. We'll put it in the org meeting every year along with the other petty cash funds.
Okay.
So I'll move that we set up a petty cash fund for the swimming pool at the amount of $100. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No, motion carries. Terrific. The last item of discussion tonight was that we received a library contract from the Mid-Hudson Library System. And all I'd like to say tonight is that we had a really good discussion about this at our last work session. And because we've been very busy researching and reading and doing this, I was going to write up something so that we could all review it and talk about it, but I haven't gotten that done. So I think what we'll do is I'll put something together, we'll distribute it, and everybody can edit it, and we can talk about it at our,
On the 20th?
yeah, I guess on the 20th, but that's kind of you won't really, well, I'll send it to you in advance so that people have time to, I'll just get it to you before. So that it should be in its final form on the 20th, because that's
Okay.
not really a good discussion atmosphere. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
All right. I mean, there were, the only surprise in that contract was it was 2 years out of it, because we had a 1 year this time, and then it was a 2.25% increase they asked for instead of the 2% that was in the former. So the rest of it we can talk about. So with that being my next chore, I don't believe you have anything else on the agenda.
I just want to do a quick follow-up on the parking lot lights. I missed an email that had come in and did some, I came across it, and unfortunately, the light posts that we have are not compatible with any other light except the one that's on them. So it would require a full replacement rather than just the light head itself. And each one of those would be $26.58.
2,658?
Right. And times the, I think it's 11 that we have here, the grand total would be $34,554. So it's not something that we're going to be looking to do immediately, but maybe we can, plan on doing a portion of it, or, start looking.
Put it on the capital improvement list.
Yeah.
There's 11 of them? We're missing
Actually, it
one
should be
down
12.
here.
Yeah, there should be 12. There's a
One
barrel
missing.
there for 2 years.
One thing we may want to consider is, well, I don't know, we're not going to invest in a new one, but maybe something different, but that's a cement stump sitting there. I don't know what happened to the old.
Well, apparently, I understand somebody backed into it, got knocked over, and it was never replaced. So, any new light would attach to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have a good base,
Yeah.
good place to start.
Yeah, nice and solid.
Well, that's good information, so you have a quote or something, we'll keep it
Right,
on file.
and
maybe.
I'm going to start looking around for alternatives then as well.
Okay.
The idea of using this company was to try and salvage the poles that we have, so
Yeah.
if that's not the case, then I can look for a complete package someplace else as well.
Okay.
Great, thank you for that.
I had spoken to some people at NYSERDA at one point, because they were always talking to me about the going LED streetlights. And I said, well, the only lights we have are in the parking lot. They said, well, that could be considered because it's a road going around if there are at least 12 lights. So,
12.
We got at least.
we got 12 lights.
What is-
So it might be something to look into
Yeah.
with NYSERDA.
You might give some money or...
They offer grants then?
Yes.
Okay.
That would be
good.
good. Yeah, good idea.
I like that idea.
So we have 2 follow-ups, or 3 follow-ups,
I'm
thank
not sure
you.
they would pay the whole thing, but
Well, anything is better than none.
Yeah, we'll take,
Exactly.
yeah, check NYSERDA, thank you for that day. Okay, without any further business, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Good night, the motion is, the meeting is over, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay.
Reading took a long time.
Yeah.
I think though,